أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري يسر لي أمري واحلل من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين رب العالمين. Okay, so let's see what happened yesterday. Going to come in the meeting, inshallah. Service not found, and we sent it back into our call. Yeah, so some kind of interruption in this, but I don't see that it's okay. I'm going to share the screen. It's let me go. So I just wanted to know uh, you knew about the science fair coming up, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going
Yeah,
to.
actually, I actually wanted to talk to you about that. I remember you told me that I had to post what my science project would be, and so do I have to do the same for the arts fair?
Sorry, did you repeat that?
I remember you telling me that I had to like write down what my science project was going to be for the science fair. So do I have to do the same for the arts fair?
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Okay,
submit your
I'll write that
topic.
right now.
Yeah, inshallah. Okay. So we have extended one more week, so we have a lot of time. It's supposed to last year we did in April, but this because I think Ramadan I gave more time, and then we had other students, contacting, so that's why. So yesterday we did. What was Allah's response for the disbelievers' demand of angel prophet? Okay, and that the prophet to be an angel, and then Allah said that even if he sent down an angel as a prophet, they still would have not believed and they would not have a chance to repent. Same thing, not have a chance to repent. Okay, good. So next we're doing Surah An'am, verse number 9, chapter 6, verse number 9. Okay, it's a small one. Is it 9? Yeah. So you can read, inshallah. Yes, you can read, Asma.
Yeah, okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقالوا لولا أنزل عليه ملك ولو أنزل ملكا لقضي الأمر ثم لا ينظرون.
Yeah, I wasn't able to hear. Can you please repeat it again?
وأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وقالوا لولا أنزل عليه ملك ولو أنزلنا ملكا لقضي الأمر ثم لا ينظرون.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah, very good. Now I can hear, alhamdulillah. Okay, so wa and qalu, they said, the voice for they. Qalu is plural. Qala is said, and qalu they said. Wa is and lo la. It looks like I've read this before. Yeah, we did that yesterday, right? Yeah. So same thing that they said, why was there not sent down to him an angel? But if we had sent down angel, the matter would have been decided and they would not be reprieved. Okay. This is the 9th one. You can read this one. Yes, Asma, you can read the next one, 9th.
Sorry?
Yes, you can read the ayah number 9.
Okay. ولو جعلناه ملكا لجعلناه رجلا وللبسنا عليهم ما يلبسون.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah, very good. Okay. So here is wa and lo if ja'alnahu. Ja'ala means to make. Na is we and who is him. وَجَعَلْنَاهُ and we and had made him malakan, an angel. لَجَعَلْنَاهُ La is certainly. Ja'ala means made. Na is we and who is him. We would have made him rajulan, a man. Walala yasna wa and la certainly. uh, Wala la yasna. Yasna na is for we, and yasnan would have obscured. Alayhim to them. Alay is on to. Him is them. Ma what yalbisun. Yalbisun they are obscuring. Okay. Yes, you can read the translation. Yes, you can read the translation.
Yeah, okay. And if we had made him the messenger an angel, we would have made him appear as a man, and we would have covered him with that in which they cover themselves, i.e., confusion and doubt.
Yes, they still would have been not clear. Obscured means they would have been obscured, not clear to them, or they would have been in doubt and confusion. So let's see in the Tafsir what says Ibn Kathir, accept senses rebellious of the refusal to accept human messengers, to arguing against it, and even if we had sent down to you a message written on a paper, same thing, same concept is going on the ninth ayah as well. And the second. Okay. So I'm going to go to classwork and back here. Back. Sometimes there's an option of not having the back noise, but sometimes you don't have that option. Reuse post, and let me just mute. Oh, I was muted. Okay, that's no problem. I'll have to repeat it again. Yes. So even if Allah had made the messenger an angel, okay, even then the disbelievers would have been in confusion and doubt. Okay, so that's the answer. Even if Allah had made an angel messenger, still the disbelievers would have been in confusion and doubt. The word is over here, yalbisun. They would have been in obscuring. Oh, it came. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, you can check. Let me know when you're done.
Done.
Okay, sure. I'm checking. Okay. I get muted. Now, Allah says that if He, again, He has to be capital because it's Allah. I have to- He, an angel, Allah would have covered him in that which you cover yourselves, confusion and doubt. Okay. Disbelievers would still be in confusion and doubt. Okay. So just correct he. Even if you had made the angel a man, you had made a messenger an angel, Allah said that they will still have been in confusion and doubt. That's correct. Just he has to be capital for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can you correct that?
Okay, this is this is Zafar Zafar from Dallas, and I'm using SGI.
All right, let me
And
know if
for
you when
some
you're
reason,
done.
when the back page,
Okay, you're
when
done.
the back page
Okay.
when you open, it comes up
Allah
asking for
says
this
that if
time,
he made the
asking for
messenger an
authentication.
angel, Allah would have
What
covered
is that authentication?
him in that which you cover yourselves. That's confusion. They still would have, the disbelievers would still have been in confusion and
No.
doubt. Okay, inshallah. You can share the screen and continue the Excel. Okay.
So I finished my Excel.
Okay, all the three subjects, mashallah.
Yeah.
Okay, you can take a break and then 12 o'clock you do the Islamic Studies and Quran class, inshallah, then, okay? Oh, you
Okay.
still haven't done, you can do Duolingo.
Okay.
Yeah, 10 minutes and then 10 makes 10 for break, okay? Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
It's just me.
Okay. Okay, Asma. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Asma, can you come and read? Okay, read it till the end of the film.
No. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم للذين أحسنوا الحسنى وزيادة ولا يرهق وجوههم فتر ولا ذلة أولئك أصحاب الجنة هم فيها خالدون والذين كسبوا السيئات جزاء سيئات بمثلها ترهقهم ذلة ما لهم من الله من عاصم فكأنما أغشيت وجوههم قطاعا ومن الليل مظلما أولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون ويوم نحشرهم جميعا ثم نقول للذين أشركوا مكانكم أنتم وشركاؤكم فزيلنا بينهم وقال شركاءهم أهم ما كنتم إيانا تعبدون فكفى بالله شهيدا بيننا وبينكم إن كنتم عن عبادتكم الغافلين هنالك تبلو كل نفس ما أسلفت وردوا إلى الله مولاهم الحق وضل عنهم ما كانوا يفترون قل من يرزقكم من السماء والأرض أمن يملك السمع والأبصار ومن يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي ومن يدبر الأمر فسيقولون الله فقل أفلا تتقون فذلكم الله ربكم الحق فماذا بعد الحق إلا الضلال فأنى تصرفون أو كذلك حقت كلمة على الذين فسقوا أنهم لا يؤمنون فقل هل من شركائكم من يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده فقل الله يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده فإن فأنا تؤفكون قل هل من شركائكم من يهدي إلى الحق قل الله يهدي للحق أفمن يهدي إلى الحق أحق أن يتبع أمن لا يهدي إلا أن يهدى فما لكم كيف تحكمون وما يتبع أكثرهم إلا ظنا إن ظن لا يغني من الحق شيئا إن الله عليم بما يفعلون وما كان هذا القرآن أن يفترى من دون الله ولكن تصديق الحق الذين بين يديه وتفصيل الكتاب لا ريب فيه من رب العالمين أم يقولون افتراه قل فأتوا بسورة مثله أو ادعوا من استطعتم من دون الله إن كنتم صادقين بل كذبوا بما لم يحيطوا بعلمه ولما يأتهم تأويله كذلك كذب الذين من قبلهم فانظر كيف كان عاقبة الظالمين ومنهم من يؤمن به ومنهم من لا يؤمن به وربك أعلم بالمفسدين وإن كذبوا فقل لي عملي ولكم عملكم أنتم بريئون مما أعمل وأنا بريء مما تعملون ومنهم من يستمعون إليك أفأنت تسمع الصم ولو كانوا لا يعقلون ومنهم من ينظر إليك أفأنت تهدي العمي ولو كان لا يبصرون إن الله لا يظلم الناس شيئا ولكن الناس أنفسهم يظلمون ويوم يحشرهم كأن لم يلبثوا إلا ساعة من النهار يتعارفون أي بينهم أو قد خسر الذين كذبوا بلقاء الله وما كانوا مهتدين إما نرينك بعض الذين نعدهم أو نتوفينك فإلينا مرجعهم ثم الله شهيد على ما يفعلون ولكل أمة رسول فإذا جاء رسولهم فقضي بينهم بالقسط وهم لا يظلمون ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل لا أملك لنفسي ضرا ولا نفعا إلا ما شاء الله لكل أمة أجل إذا جاء أجلهم فلا يستأخرون ساعة ولا يستقدمون قل أرأيتم إن آتاكم عذابه بياتا أو نهارا ماذا يستعجل منه المجرمون ثم إذا ما وقع آمنتم به الآن وقد كنتم به تستعجلون ثم قيل للذين ظلموا ذوقوا عذاب الخلد هل تجزون إلا بما كنتم تكسبون ويستنبئونك أحق هو قل إي وربي أنه لحق وما أنتم بمعجزين
MashaAllah, Tabarakallah. Okay, Asma, can you read Urdu? Can you read Islamic? Yes. Okay, social studies. We will do social studies. What? You were reading.
Yeah, but
You can fever her?
yeah, it's not that much.
You still need fever if you don't want it to increase.
Mm.
Okay. You can read it.
Aggressive action leads the U.S. to enter World War II. The aggressive actions of dictators in Germany, Italy, and Japan, along with the attack on Pearl Harbor, led by the U.S. to get involved in the Second World War. Americans were deeply affected by the war and contributed to the war in ways. What? No, this is Unit 7 overview.
What?
That isn't the history chapter. There's no church. There's no chapter.
Aggressive action leads the US.
Mama, look.
Hmm.
There's nothing there. There's no actual, what do you call thing?
Then what?
Different chapter.
Aggressive action leads to.
Overview.
First of all, overview. After that, there are chapters. Aggressive action leads to US war. ये देखो. This chapter. First of all, there was overview. After
Mama, look. Mama, look. Oh, okay, there it is.
that,
You clicked it. You clicked
ये
it.
है. First, you will read the overview. Then you will read the next.
The Road to War. In the mid-1930s, events took place that would change the course of history and lead the world to war. First, in 1931, Japan invaded the province of China, Manchuria, and in 1937 moved further into China. It would take over the city of Nanking, where it would kill an estimated 300,000 civilians in a weeks-long event known as the Massacre of Nanking. As Japan attempted to conquer China, Europe was experiencing its own power struggle. The lack of confidence in the Germany Weimar Republic led to a yearning for a new government. Adolf Hitler used this to gain control of the government of the German government and push the National Socialist German Workers' Party or Nazi Party into the spotlight. He rearmed the country and started to expand Germany. First, he annexed the country of Austria and attempted to take a portion of what? Slovakia. I'm guessing it's in Germany. Known as the Sudetenland. Many Germans lived in this area, and Hitler decided to unite the German-speaking people of Europe. In 1938, during the Munich Conference, Britain and France attempted to stop Hitler's invasion by agreeing to give Hitler the Sudetenland if he agreed to stop his European invasion. They did this without consulting the people of Czechoslovakia in hopes that it would prevent a war, and is known as the policy of appeasement. Rather than prevent war, it showed Hitler that Britain were timid and could be pushed around. It led him to make more demands, and he set his sights on Poland. The following year, he signed the Non-Aggression Pact with Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, where they agreed to invade Poland and divide the conquered land. Poland was no match for German troops as they unleashed a mass of forces known as the Blitzkrieg. The invasion of Poland led to England and France declaring war on Germany, and soon the countries were involved in a European war. Before long, Germany took over Poland and France. In Italy, Benito Mussolini established the fascist party and invaded the African country of Ethiopia. Ethiopia implored the League of Nations to assist them during the invasion, but received no help. The League of Nations was showing its weakness in preventing war, its sole purpose for creation. At the same time, General Francisco Franco led a civil war in Spain to take control of the country. He received assistance from Hitler and was able to win the war and created another fascist European government. In the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin took control in 1924 and created a model communist state where the government had complete control of all industry. He established a totalitarian government in which citizens had no rights. Stalin would push the Soviet Union to become the second largest industrial power by 1937, but would also be responsible for the death of anywhere between 8 to 13 million people due to his harsh rule. With Europe in chaos, the U.S. attempted to stay out of the fight and remain neutral. Pacifism, the belief in nonviolence, rose throughout the U.S., and many simply did not want to get involved in another world war. This would prove difficult as the country witnessed many injustices done to innocent Europeans. American neutrality. With wars raging in Asia and Europe, the U.S. took certain steps to retain its neutrality. Neutrality. Prior to the declaration of war by France and England against Germany, the U.S. was already stating its neutrality to the world with its action. The first Neutrality Act was passed by Congress on August 31st, 1935. It prohibited the export of weapons of war from the U.S. to any foreign nations at war. The act also made it known that any American traveling to a foreign warring nation would do so at their own risk. Initially, Roosevelt opposed the act but went along with public opinion. 2 years later, in 1937, another Neutrality Act was passed, known as the Cash and Carry Act. It allowed warring nations to purchase goods from America as long as they paid for the items and carried them on non-American ships. Along with this special clause, it also forbid mm, any U.S. citizen from traveling on a ship or of a warring nation or the use of any U.S. ship to transport weapons to a warring nation. Neutrality Act of 1937. As the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War in 1936 and the rising tide of fascism in Europe increased support for extending and expanding the Neutrality Act of 1937. Under this law, U.S. citizens were forbidden from traveling on belligerent ships, and American merchant ships were prevented from transporting arms to belligerent, even if those arms were produced outside of the United States. The act gave the president the authority to bar all belligerent ships from U.S. waters and to extend the support embargo to any additional articles or materials. Mm. Finally, civil wars would also fall under the terms of the Act. The Neutrality Act of 1937 did contain one important concession to Roosevelt. Belligerent nations were allowed, at the discretion of the president, to acquire any items except arms from the United States, so long as they immediately paid for such items and carried them on non-American ships, the so-called cash and carry provision. Mm, Since vital raw materials such as oil were not considered implements of war, the cash and carry clause would be quite valuable to whatever nation could make use of it. Mm, Roosevelt had engineered its inclusion as a deliberate way to assist Great Britain and France in any war against the Axis powers, since he realized that they were the only countries that had both the hard currency and ships to make use of cash and carry. Unlike the rest of the act, which was permanent, this provision was set to expire after 2 years. Neutrality Act of 1939. Following Germany's occupation of that name in March of 1939, Roosevelt suffered a humiliating defeat when Congress rebuffed his attempts to renew cash and carry and expand it to include arms sales. President Roosevelt persisted, and as war spread in Europe, his chances of expanding cash and carry increased. After a fierce debate in Congress in November 1939, a final Neutrality Act passed. The act lifted the arms embargo and put all trade with belligerent nations under the terms of cash and carry. The ban on loans remained in effect, and American ships were barred from transporting goods to belligerent ports. Mm. In October of 1941, after the United States had committed itself to aiding the Allies through the Lend-Lease, Roosevelt gradually sought to repeal certain portions of the act. On October 17th, 1941, the House of Representatives revoked Section 6, which forbade the arming of U.S. merchant ships by a wide margin. Following a series of deadly U-boat attacks against the U.S. Navy and merchant ships, the Senate passed another bill in November that also repealed legislation banning American ships from entering belligerent ports or combat zones. Overall, the Neutrality Acts represented a compromise whereby the United States government accommodated the isolationist sentiment of the American public, but still retained some ability to interact with the world. In the end, the terms of the Neutrality Acts became irrelevant once the United States joined the Allies in the fight against Nazi Germany and Japan in December 1941. Japanese aggression. Japan began its expansion in the Pacific in the 1930s as news of the country's harsh treatment during its invasion of China spread. President Roosevelt made demands of the Japanese government. Japan's aggression was literally being fueled by the United States. The Japanese military relied heavily on American steel and oil to fuel its assault on China and French Indochina. Placing a strict embargo on Japan would have seemed the obvious choice, but Roosevelt feared that Japan would strike at the resource-laden Dutch East Indies to make up the difference. By the late 1940s, the U.S. grew impatient with the continued Japanese atrocities and started to restrict trade with them. The U.S. ended shipments of scrap metal, steel, and iron ore to Japan, while at the same time, the U.S. began to send military weapons to Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Chinese forces fighting against the Japanese. For the Japanese, this was seen as a step towards war. American reaction to Japanese aggression from the Department of State Office of the Historian. At the outset, U.S. officials viewed developments in China with uncertainty. On the one hand, they opposed Japanese incursions into northeast China and the rise of Japanese militarism in the area, in part because of their sense of a long-stand friendship with China. On the other hand, most U.S. officials believed that it had no vital interest in China worth going to war over with Japan. Moreover, the domestic conflict between Chinese nationalists and communists left U.S. policymakers uncertain of success in aiding such an internally divided nation. As a result, few U.S. officials recommended taking a strong stance prior to 1937, and so the United States did little to help China for fear of provoking Japan. U.S. likelihood of providing aid to China increased after July 7th, 1937, when Chinese and Japanese forces clashed on the Marco Polo Bridge near Beijing, throwing the two nations into a full-scale war. As the United States watched the Japanese forces sweep down the coast and then into the capital of Nanjing, popular opinion swung firmly in favor of the Chinese. Tensions with Japan rose when the Japanese army bombed the USS Panay as it evacuated American citizens from Nanjing, killing 3. The U.S. government, however, continued to avoid conflict and accepted an apology and indemnity from the Japanese, and uneasy truce held between the two nations into 1940. Even while remaining neutral, the U.S. began preparing for a possible war by increasing government spending on military and instituting the first peacetime draft. At the same time, Roosevelt proposed the Lend-Lease Act to assist the Allies in their fight against the Axis powers. Roosevelt explained that if a neighbor's house was on fire, you would not sell your neighbor a hose, but lend it to him instead. The plan said that the United States would lend Great Britain the materials they would need to fight the war, and when the war was over, they would return the materials. Congress continued about the rationality of lending material to a warring nation, and some even argued that lending materials would be like lending gum. You would not want it back. After much controversy, Congress approved the Lend-Lease Act that would eventually grant $50 billion of aid to the Allies. America still proclaimed its neutrality, but the passing of the Lend-Lease Act led many to see it as a first act of war. Roosevelt continued to urge Americans to take actions. In his famous For Freedom speech, he expressed that the rights of any citizen of the world are and why it is important for America to lead the way in its assuring that the citizens of the world will get those rights. The first right is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which means a healthy economy and peaceful life for every nation everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which means a world reduction of weapons to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. The road to Pearl Harbor. After January 1940, the United States combined a strategy of increasing aid to China through larger credits and the Lend-Lease program, with a gradual move towards an embargo on the trade of all militarily useful items with Japan. The Japanese government made several decisions during these 2 years that exacerbated mm, the situation. Unable or unwilling to control the military, Japan's political leaders sought greater security by establishing the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere in August 1940. In so doing, they announced Japan's intentions to drive the Western imperialist nations from Asia. However, the Japanese-led project aimed to enhance Japan's economic and material wealth so that it would not be dependent upon supplies from the West, and not to liberate the long subject peoples of Asia. In fact, Japan would have to launch a campaign of military conquest and rule, and did not intend to pull out of China. At the same time, several pacts with Western nations only made Japan appear more of a threat to the United States. First, Japan signed the Tripartite Pact with Germany and Italy on September 27, 1940, and thereby linked the conflicts in Europe and Asia. This made China a potential ally in the global fight against fascism. And then, in mid-1941, Japan signed a neutrality pact with the Soviet Union, making it clear that Japan's military would be moving into Southeast Asia, where the United States had greater interests. A third agreement with Vichy France enabled Japanese forces to move into Indochina and to begin their southern advance. The United States responded to this growing threat by temporarily halting negotiations with Japanese diplomats, instituting a full embargo on exports to Japan, freezing Japanese assets in U.S. banks, and sending supplies into China along the Burma Road. Although negotiations restarted after the U.S. Increasingly enforced an embargo against Japan, they made a little headway. Diplomats in Washington came close to agreements on a couple of occasions, but pro-Chinese sentiments from the Chinese United States made it difficult to reach any resolution that would not involve a Japanese withdrawal from China. Mm, and such a condition was unacceptable to Japan's military leaders. The U.S. refused to accept Japan's continued specific expansion, while Japan refused to stop the expansion. As negotiations went on, the U.S., with the help of coding advice, learned that the Japanese deadlines for negotiation was set for November 25th. When the deadline passed, U.S. officials felt an attack was imminent. But believed it would occur in the Dutch East Indies or in the British Malaya. To their surprise, the Japanese fleet of aircraft carriers were headed towards Hawaii. Japan was well aware that U.S. military bases in the Philippines, Guam, American Samoa, and other small Pacific islands. An attack would not destroy the U.S. foothold in the Pacific, but it would slow down the U.S.'s ability to respond. The Japanese believed that they could capture the Philippines before the U.S. Navy could recover from the attack, and it would be a good start for their specific expansion. So, in the early morning of December 7th, 1941, with about 100 U.S. Navy ships present, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. The ships included cruisers, battleships, destroyers, and support ships. And the 2-hour attack closed to 3,000 Americans died in the attack. Many ships were damaged, and most ground planes were destroyed as well. Rather than the effect the Japanese intended, it had the opposite effect, known as the date which will live in infamy. The attack on Pearl Harbor was used as a battle. On November 26th, the Japanese attack fleet of 33 warships and auxiliary craft, including 6 aircraft carriers, sailed from northern Japan for the Hawaiian Islands. It followed a route that took it far to the north of the normal shipping lanes. By early morning, December 7th, 1941, the ships had reached their launch position 230 miles north of Oahu. Mm, At 6 a.m., the first wave of fighters, bombs, and torpedo planes took off. The night before, some 10 miles outside the entrance to Pearl Harbor, 5 midget submarines carrying 2 crewmen and 2 torpedoes. Each were launched from larger mother subs. Their mission: enter Pearl Harbor before the airstrike, remain submerged until the attack got underway, then cause as much damage as possible. Meanwhile, at Pearl Harbor, the 130 vessels of the U.S. Pacific Fleet lay calm and serene. Seven of the fleet's nine battleships were tied up along the battleship row on the southeast shore of Ford Island. Naval aircraft were lined up at Ford Island, and naval aircraft were lined up at Ford Island and Kaneohe, Kan Kane Kan 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 Kanyo Kan 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 Kano Bay naval air stations and marine aircrafts and Iwa Marine Corps Air Station at Hickam Wheeler and Bellows Airfield. Aircrafts of the U.S. Army Air Corps were parked in groups as defense against possible saboteurs. At 6:40 a.m., the crew of the destroyer USS Award spotted the conning tower of one of the midget subs headed for the entrance to Pearl Harbor. The Ward sank the sub with the depth charges and gunfire, then radioed the info to headquarters. Before 7 a.m., the radar station at Opana Point picked up a signal indicating a large flight of planes approaching from the north. These were thought to be either aircraft flying in from the carrier Enterprise or an anticipated flight of B-17s from the mainland. So no action was taken. The first wave of Japanese aircraft arrived over the target area shortly before 7:55 a.m. Their leader, Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, sent the coded messages to and Tora, telling the fleet that the attack had begun and the surprise had been achieved. Uh, At approximately 8:10, the USS Arizona exploded, hit by a 1760-pound armor-piercing shell that slammed through her deck and ignited her forward ammunition magazine. In less than 9 minutes, she sank with 1,177 of her crew. The USS Oklahoma, hit by several torpedoes, rolled over, trapping more than 400 men inside. The USS California and USS West Virginia sank at their moorings, while the USS Utah converted to a training ship, capsized with more than 50 of her crew. The USS Maryland, USS Pennsylvania, and USS Tennessee all suffered a significant damage. The USS Nevada attempted to run out to sea, but took several hits and had to be run underground to avoid sinking and blocking the harbor entrance. Mm. While the attack on Pearl Harbor intensified, other military installations on Oahu were hit. Hickam, Wheeler, and Bellows Airfield, Iwa Marine Corps Air Station, Kaneohe Bay Naval Air Station, and Schofield Barracks suffered varying degrees of damage, with hundreds of planes destroyed on the ground and hundreds of men killed or wounded. After about 5 minutes, American anti-aircraft fire began to register hits, although many of the shells had been improperly fused, fell on Honolulu, where residents assumed them to be Japanese bombs. After a lull at 8:40 a.m., the second wave of attacking planes focused on continuing the destruction inside the harbor, destroying the USS Sotomayor, a dry dock, and heavily damaging the Nevada, forcing her aground. Mm. The Japanese also attacked Hickam and Kaneohe, Kaneo, and airfields, causing heavy loss of life and reducing American ability to retaliate. Army Air Corps or Air Corps pilots managed to take off with a few fighters and may have shot down 12 enemy planes. At 12 a.m., the second wave of attacking planes withdrew to the north and the assault was over. The Japanese lost 29 planes and five midget submarines, one of which was captured when it ran aground off Bellows Field. The attack was a great but not total success. Although the U.S. Pacific Fleet was shattered, its aircraft carriers, not in port at the time of the attack, was still afloat, and Pearl Harbor was surprisingly intact. The shipyards, fuel storage areas, and submarine base suffered no more than slight damage. More importantly, the American people, previously divided over the issue of U.S. involvement in World War II, rallied together with a total commitment to victory over Japan and her Axis partners. Declaration of war. The very next day, President Roosevelt addressed the Congress and asked for a declaration of war. Congress approved with only one dissenting vote, and the U.S. turned away from its isolation policy and joined the growing World War. 4 days later, Japan's allies, Germany and Italy, declared war on the U.S., pushing the U.S. into a war with two different fighting fronts.
Ma,
Mhm.
it's your voice, please. Mama. What did you understand, Asma? Can you summarize it?
The US went through way too much war. That's what I understood. The US was like, okay, I'm not going to fight at all for like 10 years. And then ultimately, it went through like a huge bloodbath.
Okay. Okay, and that was your lesson for today. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.